Okay. He's quiet now.
Okay. And I have keys on the wall, like Harry caught when he was down in the dungeon. So those are some of the things around the room. Thank you for coming. 3.5 years, I've talked about maybe doing this. And then I was in graduate school, and then there was a pandemic, and there's still a pandemic. So thanks for joining us on Zoom. Aw. And I'm glad everybody's here. So the way that I think this might go is that we go movie by movie, one at a time, as we are today in the Sorcerer's Stone, but trying not to overthink the Bible parts, because J.K. Rowling did not intend for Harry Potter to be an allegory of Jesus' death and resurrection. However, there are a lot of gospel undertones present that we can pick out. So we've been doing C.S. Lewis's The Great Divorce, which C.S. Lewis was intentional about writing gospel messages in his texts, especially with the Chronicles of Narnia or with The Great Divorce that we just did. And there's actually an interesting quote that I do want to share with you from C.S. Lewis, but what J.K. Rowling said about her books was it was more of an accident, and it just emerged that way as I continued to write. So I don't want us to nitpick to death every tiny little thing that could be like, oh, this is a gospel message, or this is reference to something in Psalms. We can do that as much as we want, but it's not that we have to just think everything in Harry Potter has a biblical message to it. So a lot of the things we can talk about are just what are meaningful parts from the stories, or what are parts that stuck out to you, or then when there are moments that has to do with the Bible, then we can bring those up too. And so I have 2 books that are interesting to me that have helped. This one's called Teaching Faith with Harry Potter, a guidebook for parents and educators for multi-generational faith formation. This was written by an Episcopalian scholar, and she was helping adults to figure out how to reach kids with the Harry Potter stories. This one I used more topically. So for example, just to open to a page, Dumbledore's Army, that's in the 5th book, having to do with confirmation. And wholeness versus holiness. So she wrote more thematically, and so that's helped me some. But this other one is called The Gospel According to Harry Potter, and it is chapter by chapter, is one book at a time. And here are some messages that we can learn from this one. And so if we're just today focusing on Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, obviously there might be things that come up in future books and movies that if you've read them or seen them, that may come up, but mostly let's try to focus on one at a time. I don't know if everyone's gotten through every movie already. I know that my mom still has 2 left, and so let's avoid the whole spoilers for that. Just, we're getting through them, we're almost there. But that's kind of how I wanted to set up an introduction. Today, some of the themes that I was struck by were things related to brokenness, because Harry starts off with a broken family. He starts off being broken himself, literally with a scar, and we find out his glasses are broken. And the very first spell that's cast verbally that we hear in the story is Hermione saying reparo to fix his glasses. And so that would be one theme that we could think about today. But other things related to good versus evil and the power of love, those are some of the main big themes that as we talk through what we like and don't like about the movie and what strikes us, we can be thinking of those. And as the conversation ebbs and flows, if I have come up with notes about something else, I might just say, okay, well, now what do you guys think about? Let's transition our conversation and talk about platform 9 3/4. And then now we just talk about that. So I don't know how this is going to go. I have notes and I have a lot of ideas, but I also want the conversation to be organic. So thanks for coming. There's a lot of you on Zoom and a lot of you that I really care about and appreciate. Thanks. I'm happy to see you. Are you hearing me enough? Sort of. Okay. Got some thumbs up. I won't be so hot and tired when I set up next time because I don't have to make everything from scratch. All the stuff is now made. So there's that. But thank you for letting us get started a few minutes late. So
We're waiting.
yeah. I'll start by saying Harry got his Hogwarts letter at age 11, and J.K. Rowling was baptized at age 11. I can tell you lots and lots of facts.
I like the one about all the letters coming to Harry, and his uncle, I guess would be, was insistent upon he not receiving them.
Right.
And unbeknownst to him, he still got them.
Right. Yeah. So let's talk about that.
The letters came. They came by the truckload. We just rewatched the movie, so it's fresh in my mind. And when he gets to that scene where he says, I guess he's in his living room and he looks so frazzled, and he says, my favorite day of the week is finally here. What day is it? Sunday.
No mail.
No post on Sunday, he says, and the letters come anyways, right?
Yeah.
So that is a really cool part of the movie.
Yeah.
Harry's bound to get the letter. They will get it to him one way or another.
Right. And so the letter starts by saying, Harry in the cupboard, and then they
Right.
panic. And to add one more detail in the book, then they decide they're going to let him have a bedroom. So then the next letter comes, Harry in the smallest bedroom. How do they know? Are they stalking us? And then they leave and they go to a hotel. Harry in the hotel room 17. And then they head off to the big rock, which
They're
does
like
show
the
up in the
island,
movie on the
right?
island.
Yes.
Harry, island on the rock, or cabin on the rock, in the sea. Like he's pursued 4 different locations for Hogwarts to finally track him down.
But isn't that God?
Yeah.
You
He will
know,
find you
he'll
anywhere,
find
right?
you.
Right.
You know, he knows we are.
Yeah.
He'll find you.
He's gonna find you.
Yeah.
As much as we watch these movies, Caitlin noticed something today that we've never noticed, right?
Oh, because in the books it talks about like the emerald green ink that they write the Hogwarts letter.
And we never noticed it much in the movie, but sure enough.
I was watching when I'm really tired. It's been like a while, so I noticed that it was like slightly moving.
Yeah, she noticed it was actually emerald today. I never noticed that either.
Yeah. I wrote out the letters and I left them at home, but I used dark green.
You have it in green, of course.
I did.
I didn't know.
Yeah, I would take that God would find us a step further and that God will pursue us because they were pursuing Harry. They weren't giving up on him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Hagrid went to all depths.
Yeah, well, Hagrid had a special attachment. He fell in love with Harry the day he had to drop the book.
Their
Right.
bond is so special,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
When he hugs him at the end, when
Yeah,
he kind of gives him that hug.
yeah, yeah.
Because he
It
didn't
was
want
like
to
letting
leave
go
her.
of his child almost, right?
That day was when he goes up on the motorcycle. and he's
Yeah,
like,
it has the
"Okay,
baby.
inside."
I think it's so
Cover.
hilarious.
Yeah,
Straight
straight
up,
up.
everyone. Like that's why he's like with the animals all the time.
Okay.
He's like,
Is that what it is?
I think it's just like him being around and being so trusted by the animals, like a good character representation. Yeah.
Animals can feel that.
He's nurturing. Hagrid is, yeah.
He perfectly embodies something.
Yeah.
That's where he comes from.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially with him like in the first movie when he like with like the dragon, like him like being so attached to the dragon, like hesitant to give it up.
Even if the dragon pursuit was, you know, if we're thinking of right and wrong, was definitely wrong for him to be pursuing a dragon. when they're like illegal for him to be like having in his wooden hut. Yeah, couldn't help himself because he had that much care for nurturing things. And so Vernon then destroying the letters and trying everything he can to keep Harry out of that world that he was fearful of. What do you think Petunia and Vernon were so afraid of? What was their trouble?
They were afraid of the magic and of Harry's parents
Mhm.
because of what she had apparently caused them hardship at one time.
I think her sister was jealous,
Mm.
and that, I think, played very heavy on how she reacted to everything. Now, she was so kind.
Yeah.
And Harry, nah, maybe not.
Right.
Well, I think the note of jealousy is what is the perfect word. It hits really hard there because I think that scene is very comparable to think about, just how Satan looks through our lives and how Lucifer is an angel who was cast out and fell, and he is jealous of us because we are the ones that are forgiven over and over again and showed countless mercy. There's that hint of jealousy, whereas Petunia is jealous that she never got to be with, she never got to go to Hogwarts.
Yeah. And we do get that insight later. We get to see some of those memories of why Petunia and Lily have, which is Harry's mother, why they have a strained relationship. And it comes back to that rift of magic versus muggle. One thing I think about with Petunia and Vernon is how they lied to Harry about him being in a car accident as a little kid and not the real reason why he was not with his parents anymore. And so, they were just like, oh yeah, you got the scar from a car crash. And when we talked about the brokenness earlier and how that was a symbol of brokenness, was that the scar was a result of a curse rebounding and striking Harry on the forehead. I thought it was interesting, just like one of the first pieces of symbolism was this verse here. It says, the lightning bolt scar on Harry's forehead can serve as a reminder that the curse of death was broken, which had happened to Harry when he got his scar, and that good is more powerful than evil. Jesus gave his disciples the power to trample on snakes and scorpions and to overcome all the power of the enemy. Therefore, although they are real and dangerous, we need to not cower over fear of evil spirits. That was not the thing I meant to read. I meant to read this. Luke 10:18-19. I watched Satan fall from heaven like a flash of lightning. See, I have given you authority to tread over snakes and scorpions and over all the powers of the enemy, and nothing will hurt you. Because God was more powerful than Satan, God cast him out like lightning. So that I thought was one of the first symbols that, comes up, that yes, we're not looking for every single little thing in Harry Potter to match up with the Bible, but that one was pretty obvious.
Is that in the Bible? I don't remember that.
Yeah, Luke 10:18-19. Yeah, I mean, I read it out of here summarized, but that was, she's using the NIV in this book.
It's funny the wording there because it's not really, she doesn't ever really give a clear reason why it was a lightning bolt shape, other than the fact that he got hit by the killing curse, but it doesn't really explain why a lightning bolt. It could have been in the shape of anything, so it's funny that wording matches.
Right,
So
but then lightning comes up here, and I want to table this topic for a second because another word in here, and I know of two greenhouse people at the table and at least two on Zoom. This is not against the House of Slytherin, but yes, you're pinned right now, the Pullman. And hi, Paul, we're dragging you into this too a little bit, I guess. It did say, he has given us the authority to tread on snakes and scorpions and over the power of the enemy. And so I do want us to come into that piece a little bit later when we get into talking about Harry's sorting. Okay, so we'll keep that in the back of our minds. No offense to any greenhouse friends in the room. Just because no wizard who went bad wasn't in Slytherin doesn't mean they're all bad.
Caitlin and I had a discussion. Like, Mom, they're not. Caitlin will fight for Slytherin all day long. It's funny that you both are up for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had that discussion today.
So let's backtrack a little bit and let's talk about the prologue, so to speak, or chapter 1, before Harry's conscious. He's a baby, Voldemort's rising to power, and we kind of learn a little bit, even at the end of the book, when Dumbledore refers to things, we learn about things when Hagrid is in the leaky cauldron talking to Harry, and then we see a little bit of it when Harry's getting dropped off by Hagrid and Dumbledore and McGonagall are there. So thinking of those 3 sections of the movie and thinking about he who must not be named, they aren't saying Voldemort. His rise to power is terrifying, but yet now Harry's defeated him, so to speak. So they're going to praise the boy who lived. With all those elements I've just listed, let's turn the conversation that way. Yep.
So that means he was very strong at birth, because he was extremely young when he had his first encounter. And it's making it sound like Voldemort was afraid, and that's what he said.
Right.
I like how the book kind of, before it explains how the events of that night went down, I like how the book makes it seem like Harry had something special about him. And then we do end up learning that it had nothing to do with him, but, you know, and I think that kind of symbolizes more so how, you know, we a lot of people kind of tend to see, you know, this is my work, I did this, instead of saying this is what God did, and God made this possible. And that's exactly, you know, it was his mother's protection over him that would even allow him to live.
Right. The mother's protection especially, I think, is how bad that affecting the people hearing it. Okay. Yeah, his mother's protection was definitely the most important little gospel element there as far as like self-sacrificial love.
Yeah, but that isn't brought out at first. It's
Right.
brought out later, and
Right.
I thought, oh, yeah, that really makes sense.
But that does come up at the end of book 1. Yeah, so
Right.
when Harry's in
Right.
with the hospital. Yeah. So we can refer to all those pieces. I was just saying, let's not talk about stuff that Harry learns in book 5. So if we're thinking about what happened at the very beginning, but through the lens of everything Dumbledore says at the end and everything Hagrid says there in Diagon Alley, we can use those elements to help us dissect for now. And what's funny is this book that I'm using, The Gospel According to Harry Potter, this lady, decided to write this after the 4th one came out because there was so much interest in that. And so when she wrote the revised version, when the 7th book finally came out, she didn't revise anything in chapters 1 through 4. She left it as if it was happening then. So she tried to keep it chapter by chapter without spoilers or alluding to things that happened later. And so that was just why I mentioned maybe we keep the conversation as best we can away from truths that come up in future books, which is really hard when all of us love it.
Right?
Yeah. And that's the case with the gospel, because I'll lead us in this next section, because when we think about Harry and he's this baby sitting on this doorstep, he's outside in an outdoor sleeping spot as a baby, so kind of manger-like. He's out there. There are people celebrating that he doesn't even know, like the angels maybe, telling the good news to the shepherds. They're all going and like having what they call, it's bonfire night happening early. There were celebrations out in the streets, but then yet at the same time behind the scenes we have Dumbledore and McGonagall and Hagrid, who are just like, this isn't over. It's over for now, but like we're just not sure, so let's get this baby some protection. And I think that with that comes this sense of, we know that Jesus overcame death. And so when we read the Old Testament, we see it through that lens. And when we think of these movies, if it's not our first time watching them anymore, and then you go back and you watch number one again, yet you know how everything unfolds, then you start to see it through different eyes. But at that point, they wouldn't even say his name. He who must not be named. They didn't say Voldemort out of fear. And so it's like when we blame something else for, sinful nature within ourselves or something, we're not naming the sin. But when we think about Harry's scar and we think about Harry laying on this porch in the Muggle world, while the wizarding world is celebrating something they've only heard about, how much doubt was happening in that wizarding community? Yes, they were celebrating, but had they actually seen any trace that Harry was still alive? All they had to believe was Dumbledore, right?
That's like we are today. We believe that Christ died for us, but we have no proof. So it goes on belief and trust. And I think that that's what they were conveying when they left Harry on the doorstep. And one of the things that I took away from was Harry's life under the stairs. To me, he was an abused child, but he bubbled up to the top and controlled his environment as best he could.
Yeah. And I mean, that was a trust situation too, where Dumbledore and McGonagall just had to trust that Harry was gonna make it to 11 years old. And I mean, Dumbledore had his reasons for letting Harry stay there for all those years that we kind of hear about more later, but we can kind of speculate on from a standpoint of trying to stay in book one. But what do you think from that perspective would be some of his motives? Why would Dumbledore have even made that the case?
Because I think that the evil powers are not supposed to be used on Earth or with the Muggles. And they figured that he was actually being protected by being with Muggles rather than with going to Hogwarts, because they really didn't have any place to really care for a baby,
Right.
or a little boy.
Yeah, or any just random wizarding family. Maybe he would have been too pampered. Oh, this
But
Prince
they would've known
Harry.
he's famous, right?
Yeah.
I think they wanted Harry to learn what Muggle life was growing up, so that he could relate to it later when he became a wizard.
That's good.
Humbling. It was a very humbling experience for him too, and I feel like it probably kept him humble, in his as he goes on.
Yeah.
The Dumbledore didn't seem concerned that Harry couldn't handle whatever was coming. He almost as though he had to go through trial by fire to, Dumbledore felt that Harry would become who Harry became just by those experiences.
It more or less gave him a background and everything of what was going to come, foreseeing in the future, with everything that he would actually wind up having to face. And it seemed like if one thing after another, he was being more or less abused as a child. This more or less, I guess, gave him, seemed to, in my opinion, seemed to harden him a little bit in the end.
Resiliency.
Resilience, yeah.
Yeah.
He's not coddled by any means, right? Not like his cousin, because his cousin, Dudley, not like Dudley, but his cousin, right?
Harry's at least one of his main archetypes is that he is the leader who had power thrust upon him. He didn't ask for it, and that's what makes him so perfect for it.
Right.
And the thing is like you said, he could be pampered by other people. And even if we're disregarding what we found out of Dumbledore's involvement in Harry's life in the last few books, how involved and how he set up everything. Even in the, you know, that first moment when he gave Harry away, Dumbledore knew this wasn't over. Like I said, Dumbledore, McGonagall, Hagrid, they knew this wasn't over. They knew that at some point Voldemort would be back and he would be coming after Harry. So, you know, Harry had to be prepared from an early age to be that leader, to be the person to rise up and not be a coward.
It also struck me there were 3 people that left out,
Yeah,
as in the 3 wives.
yeah,
Oh, yeah.
true.
So more Christmas story.
No, it's like Hagrid just brought him on his own, they were all there spending.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Just to leave him on a doorstep, there was no reason for 3 people.
Right, exactly, in the middle of the night, you know, it was kind of like just the
Yeah.
3 of them in the middle of the street.
Did you guys hear that? It was like the 3 wise men with McGonagall, Harry, and Dumbledore leaving him on the doorstep. Wow.
Yeah. Another thing, though, is I think it also affected the choices and friends that he made when he went to Hogwarts. That he wasn't going for the pampered, the entitled. He was going for people that were real.
Yeah, and Draco tried to get him to be his friend. There were 2 opportunities for that, one in the book and then, or 2 in the book, and then 1 was replicated in the movie where Draco was trying to get him, hey, yeah, come be my friend, and then
Right.
giving him a hard time. You're gonna hang out with a Weasley,
Right.
and yeah.
Shaming him almost for it.
Mhm. Yeah, and in that moment, that's kind of how Harry became concerned about Slytherin, I guess, just because his first association was Draco is wanting to be in Slytherin. Draco upsets me. Okay, therefore, I don't want to be in Slytherin, right?
I think it's also important to note though, because it is Ron, or it's Ron in the movies, but Hagrid in the books, 2 people very close to Harry that said there wasn't a witch or wizard that went bad who wasn't in Slytherin. I think it's also important to remember that even your closest friends can make mistakes and lead you astray as well.
Yeah. But even in hearing that from Harry, I think his desire to stamp out evil is so strong that even just hearing that, whether it was true or not, was just the motivator for him to want to flee from that evil. And I don't know if that's him feeling the torture of his family being broken apart because of Voldemort being the pure embodiment of evil, or if it's just something in his nature that he wanted to flee from that. But there are a lot of moments that we come across later and still in this book where Harry hears that you know, he's in the Forbidden Forest doing that detention, and he finds out that, you know, something is trying to pursue this Sorcerer's Stone. And so he's like, I've got to stamp out this evil, you know, I've got to. He's just compelled to get rid of evil, like above all else, because then he broke the rules to do that. So platform 9 3/4 and Diagon Alley. So we're kind of moving. We've gotten, Harry has gotten his letter. We talked about that. We talked about Hagrid's relentless pursuit of Harry. We've talked about his upbringing a little bit. So let's transition to the wizarding world a little bit. How would that make you feel? I know Christy got to experience it for the first time.
But 9 3/4?
Yeah, we just went on Thursday to the park. It's pretty special.
It's amazing there, right? I mean, it's so, she was just saying when we were watching the movie, go ahead, help a little.
Well, I like because it also, it represents Diagon Alley and Hogsmeade. So you get to see so many different aspects of the wizarding world there. And also there's just so many shops, and you get to really like experience almost like what Harry would have seen walking through for the first time.
Mm-hmm. Even down to the sound of the bricks on each other grinding.
How he must have felt to see the wall open and to see all of these people.
Especially after his like regular, like normal life.
Normal, sounds far normal though, really, from Harry's point of view.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, under the stairs and.
One of the first sentences in the books is talking about how normal the Dursleys view themselves as. So coming from this normalcy to the wizarding world, which is like all like crazy.
I mean, it must have been like really awe-inspiring.
I see a parallel in that in our world, we live in a world where there's matter, solid things, matter that God has made, and yet God is the God of matter. He created matter, and the world that we live in is what's temporary, and the world where the spiritual world that is right alongside us is the real world.
Yeah, and that parallel is happening there as Harry goes through the bricks, as Harry goes through the platform in a little bit. It's like the two are in the same dimension, but not. Yeah, and so, I mean, we can't overthink again. We can't think everything in the wizarding world is spiritual and everything in the muggle world is not. That's not how we have to think about all of it, but I think in some of these cases, that physicality of going through these dimensions, it paints that picture really nicely. Yeah.
I think another thing that Harry's upbringing really had an impact on is how he viewed others. As like when he went into Gringotts, a lot of wizards view goblins as kind of lesser creatures. You can compare that to racism and things like that today. He had none of that. He had no clue because he was raised up around it.
Yeah.
It was a thing he just completely innocent to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and even innocent to knowing like a muggle burn versus a pure blood, and knowing that like the Weasley family didn't even have a lot of gold and that kind of thing. It didn't faze him. And so speaking of Gringotts and the gold, another kind of spiritual allegory symbolism kind of comes in here when all of a sudden Hagrid lets Harry know, what, you thought your parents left you nothing? Right. And then he gets into this vault and he sees all this gold, right?
But he's always empathetic.
Mm-hmm.
When he sees Ron with I go on the train.
Got a homemade sandwich.
You can see the last thing Ron wants. And he immediately.
And he just met
said,
us, and he just met
yeah,
us. He didn't know him from
he
anybody.
saw the need.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then I think of Christ saying, no, don't push the kids away.
Mm-hmm.
Ron's his first friend too, like, other than Hagrid and maybe Hedwig, Ron is the first person in the Wizarding world who was like really nice to him and started talking to him. Especially coming from like the background he did with Dudley.
With no friends, right? Really, he had no one.
Dudley would like chase them away.
Yeah.
So Harry gets to the Wizarding world and all the people suddenly love him.
Yeah.
But then Ron is the only one that actually makes a connection with him. They become like actual friends.
Yeah.
About how Harry must have felt like knowing people knew his name and knew like the legend of his life.
There's one line in the book, in the movie, where Ron says that Hermione knows more about Harry than he does.
Exactly.
Hermione knew about his dad as Harry than he had.
I mean, that must have been like such an odd feeling though, to have strangers all around you that know more about your history than you do.
Yeah.
I thought
She knows
Hermione
more
was a
about
little bit more snotty when she first met the guys.
She
Yeah.
had quite an edge.
Yeah.
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 But
And
Caitlin told me
walk around
something
like that.
interesting. She said because she was she had something to prove, right? Like something to.
All the Pickles will, like, they all come from this background of knowledge, well, she has to get everything that she has from books, because she doesn't have that, like, family experience.
The edge almost.
Yeah.
yeah, she wanted to belong, and her only way at that point was through learning it, and she couldn't have experienced it like everyone else. Yeah. And that, I mean, to bring up the racism thing, I mean, that, as far as privilege goes,
Sure,
that's like,
that's like right on.
yeah, Hermione had to work twice as hard to try and get herself caught up.
There's a lot of themes of like racism and inequality throughout the Harry Potter series as a whole, especially with like the whole, like, the topic of the war and stuff, like, just the back and forth, like, in the pure blood, like Draco especially thinking he's superior.
Right. I liked how the book presented Platform 9 3/4 a little bit more in depth than the movie. So in the movie, Harry's just there and confused. But in the book, Vernon is like relishing Harry's confusion because Harry has this ticket that says 9 3/4, not even 9 1/2, right? 9 3/4. There is no such platform in the world that Harry knows. And Vernon is just like, well, see ya, and just leaves him.
Which is so strange.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. I mean, this kid has not been taken care of at all.
Right.
Like they are pitted against this poor child. And so it takes the Weasley family to be there to kind of unlock that door for Harry. And so I think that is another example. I don't think there is one, Christ figure or one like specific, oh, this is the way to go. Because I feel like Dumbledore has moments of this, Harry, his mother, the Weasleys, everybody kind of gets this moment of presenting like Christ-like behavior or whatever. But in this moment, Harry needed the way to get through, right?
And the Weasleys were there, and Caitlin brought something up today when we were watching. She said, the Weasleys have all these children that have gone to Hogwarts, but here she is. What was she yelling?
She was yelling about the muggles there, that they're all going to Platform 9 3/4. Like,
It was almost like she was lighting the path for Harry.
It was like perfectly timed. She was passing by just as Harry was looking around.
It was like she was there to guide him to the platform.
The Weasleys were like a church family.
Yeah.
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 They really brought him in.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Even though they had almost nothing.
And all the children.
They would barely like care for their own children, sure, but they welcome
Well,
Harry.
isn't that the idea? Right?
Yeah. And I mean, just that relationship and going back to that time when they're on the train and Harry offering all the muggles or all the fancy sweets he's never had to Ron. If Petunia had been responsible for getting Harry a meal on the train, it would have been even worse than the little sandwich that Ron
Harry
got.
would have been cooking on the train.
Yeah.
I'll get the coffee ready.
Right. And so, and I think those of you who have been making this point, that's where Harry's strength is in the empathy that he is built up by having to fend for himself for so long, because then that has helped him to show that he has something to offer with the Weasleys. And it says here, he came out onto Platform 9 3/4, the same person, but he had stepped into a whole new world of possibilities and was now on his way to learning how to function in the supernatural world. And so that was what Giovanna was talking about earlier with we're in like kind of two dimensions here. So I already mentioned the Reparo with the glasses. Hermione had that moment where she fixed his glasses. But other than that, and helping to like move the plot points forward, they're not really friends yet. She's just kind of a classmate at this point, right?
Right. He was like annoying almost like for a
Yeah.
while.
Right.
Mhm.
It's like Harry, Ron, and then there's Hermione, like very alone.
They got stuck in the car together type thing.
Yeah. So the one Lego set I brought today is the one, right? Okay, so others are coming. Different, the decorations will change week by week, not 100%. There's a lot of staples over there. But the Lego set I brought today is of the Transfiguration classroom. No, sorry, just kidding. It's not the Charms classroom. And they're trying to get the feathers to fly. So that's the scene where it's kind of the transition point for Harry and Ron to then become friends with Hermione. So right at that moment, they're falling out. That's the worst there is, because Ron is extremely hateful towards Hermione. She goes off crying in the bathroom alone, but the boys get convicted because it's Halloween. All of a sudden there's a troll. They're worried for her and they go after her and they find her. They save her. She lies for them. And then in the book it says, you offered so many book quotes already. I just didn't know.
I've read the first book in like a few years.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
Her favorite book.
I read the fifth book.
There's some things you can go through without becoming friends. So there's not that many things you can go through, like defeating a troll. that can change you forever kind of thing. And like, and that's one of those moments. So from then on, through thick and thin, pretty much we've got the trio, right? Trio, we get three again. We get three again. All right, Harry's gonna get sorted now. We have a paradox here, biblically speaking, of chosen by God versus free will. Okay, so there's the next theme I wanted to bring up. It's a little meaty.
I'm probably not going exactly where you're thinking.
No,
with this.
I'm not thinking, that's my only sentence.
Okay, so, as far as the sorting goes, and like you said, him choosing not to be in Slytherin.
This is a Slytherin speaking.
I'm gonna sit here and defend this. I have 8 weeks to make my case, okay? So he sits here and he says, not Slytherin, not Slytherin. He chooses, I don't want to be in Slytherin. And, I think one of the most endearing things about Harry as a character and why everyone connects to him so well is he is not perfect. He's not just this golden boy who does no wrong. There are times when he messes up. And I think, at least personally for me, you kind of look at it like we go back to being prejudiced, we go back to, like we talked about racism and things like, being prejudiced against people. Because of what Ron or Hagrid, depending on what you're looking at the books, and maybe Ron or Hagrid said to him, because of one bad person he talked to, Draco, he sees this entire group of people. He sees Slytherin as evil, as bad. Not a single witch or wizard that went bad was not in Slytherin. And I feel like that was definitely a time, think of, obviously Draco should not have been his first friend, but think of how different the story would have changed if at some point, within the next few years, they had made a friendship or, found a way to make that bond. Think of, I know we're supposed to say in the first book, but think of how different the sixth book might have been if by that book, Harry had extended his arm in friendship instead of just shunning Slytherin as a whole. Think of the last book when Slytherin is the only house not to stay in the castle, not to stay at the end of the last book. If Harry had been that person to extend their arm, and just like we're not meant to shun people just because, oh, you're an atheist, and I can't talk to you. That's exactly who we're not supposed to be. We're supposed to be the people who are extending our arms out to the people who are struggling, to the people who might not understand the right way to do things, but
Yeah.
yeah.
No, that's definitely true.
I was thinking of the pipe.
This group of 11-year-olds can somehow be evil just because they share a dorm.
Right.
Like, I feel like because the entire rest of the school shuns them completely, it's almost motivation, like they have nowhere else to turn. Like they all have to be together just because they value ambition and resourcefulness. They're stuck only with each other because everyone else doesn't take the initiative to go be friends. Even though all that ties Slytherin together is their values and where they sleep.
Mm-hmm.
It really does feel like a 3 versus 1 at some
Yeah.
points. Like the entire school is against Slytherin,
Right.
and like you said, they're ambitious. They're not going to back, and their whole character traits and why they're sorted is they're not going to back down from the challenge of, just because it's 3 versus 1, they're going to find a way to do it.
Yeah.
That's part of who they are, and so it's really almost a thing of this 3v1 is what pushes them to work so hard and maybe not to do some not so great things to come out on top, is because they're at such a disadvantage.
But I mean, if you think of all the character traits of each of the houses, as far as Hufflepuff being loyal, well, you can be loyal to a fault also.
Yes.
I mean, you can be, if you're brave to a fault, then you're reckless. And if your wit is what saves you every time, you're never thinking with your heart. So I mean, every house has something that's going to cause its downfall. And it just seems that this ambitious side when it comes to Slytherin. Like you said, alternate dimension wise, like what if Harry had chosen differently, or what if the Sorting Hat had insisted, or whatever, we could think of different ways that this story could go. That's where we have to just realize too, that a lady put together a story on paper who had heavy Christian background influence in her life, but not trying to write an allegory at the same time. And so there's faults within the authorship. And there's even things that come up that we'll see that are contradictory sometimes in how she wrote certain things. Like, for example, she mentions that Harry's parents were head boy and girl in book 1, and then that's never mentioned again. And in fact, we found out in 5, the dad's kind of a slacker. So, you know, she's an author with some flaws, you know, in her writing. Yeah.
Remus is the prefect, and yet somehow James becomes head boy.
Right, yeah.
Different correlation.
Well, look,
So
I'm
it's not
on the
flawless.
prefect as well, so.
Yeah. But with all that being said, and not to hurt the feelings of a Slytherin, we have another passage. Satan is never mentioned in these books, but Revelation 5:5, referring to Jesus as the Lion of the tribe of Judah, and that he will stamp out that serpent.
Gryffindor.
So we can thank the author for that. Hi. Do we have 2 goddaughters and a godson on Zoom today? Yeah. Oh, is she doing her Star Trek there? That's Arwen. She's in Las Vegas.
You know, when you go back to the beginning, the way Harry was brought up, he was, like you said, he was abused. He was treated horribly. Cousin got everything, you know, the whole 9 yards. He didn't really even know, I mean, he was just in awe of what was going on until he actually had to try his wand when all the books went. He doesn't, they're not showing it, like, he's not coming out of it as an angry child. Say, well, now I'm free, I can do, you know, he was never cocky about everything. He
Right.
was always shy and never really realized that he had powers.
Yeah.
You know, it wasn't until, like, so with the wand was, you know, kind of threw him a little.
Right. I mean, he just said, these things just happened to me. Like, I didn't make the glass disappear. I didn't make my hair grow back in the book it talks about, but.
Sorry, I think one thing I like a lot about that, like I said, like I was talking about earlier, how Harry is not perfect. I think that helps him a lot in the long run, because the book talks about all the time how, you know, he's not Hermione for sure. He doesn't have the work ethic, but Harry is very talented as a wizard. He is extremely talented as a wizard. And so if he didn't have his upbringing, he didn't have, you know, his faults and things, I feel like it very easily, those talents would have gone to his head, just like it did for his father.
Yeah.
I think that would, you know, that his whole development depended on his faults and depended on his upbringing.
Yeah, and regardless of whether Snape thinks Harry is arrogant, he definitely is not as arrogant as his father. Yeah. That's for sure. I think that his abuse and his neglect is what has shaped him to flee from evil, because it was thrust upon him day after day, and whether that's good or bad that he didn't give Slytherin a chance, it shaped him, and that helped him make that decision. So another little symbolic moment is Dumbledore in his opening speech. He's got silly things to say in the book, but in both the book and the movie, he gives a dire warning without really any explanation. He just says, don't go to the 3rd floor corridor, it's forbidden. That's it, we just don't go. And so you could die. So here we have Genesis chapter 2:16. God gives a dire warning too. You are free to eat from any tree in the garden, but you must not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, for when you eat of it, you will surely die. Was God just trying to scare the man? Was God being cruel? No, God simply understood what would happen if anyone ate from that particular tree. And he did not want people to experience death, so he gave the warning. And again, that's Dumbledore to a fault. We see a lot in every book. Dumbledore gives information without giving all the information.
It's half truths. Like,
And half truth.
the whole thing's back just to reveal them later or have something else reveal them.
Yeah, there is no one Christ or God figure here, because here Dumbledore in this situation is symbolically acting in a godlike way, but yet we see that he's flawed also.
Going back to the sorting hat, and talking about free will versus like being predestined or something, everyone else gets the hat stuck on them. They're concerned and whatnot. Like with Draco, I mean, it doesn't even get on his head and he shouts Slytherin.
Right.
Everything about Draco shouts Slytherin. And Harry has all this potential inside of him, and the hat is deliberating, and Harry gets to choose. And that's really unique, because a lot of people, I don't think it mentions anyone else in the book.
Not in a movie.
Oh, okay. Who gets to choose like that.
Yeah. Hermione does say in one of the books that at one point she said that the hat did consider putting her in Ravenclaw for a moment.
Yeah, in the books, it's all that dialogue is in the mind. It's not out loud.
Right. So we're only hearing that Harry and the Sorting Hat are having a conversation because we're watching the movie through Harry's eyes through almost every scene of the movie. So I think that's part of why we hear that dialogue and not other kids' dialogue. But you're right. I mean, it is instantaneous for Draco. Yeah.
We'll just chalk that up to the failed pedagogy.
Yes, yes. You can bring that up whenever you'd like. Cameron and Tara and I have listened to a podcast for years. It's called Harry Potter and the Sacred Text, and I don't recommend it. We listen to it anyway. And it is atheist Harvard divinity students who dissect Harry Potter as if it is a sacred text. So they read it through that lens as if it was written holy, even though the author herself is human and flawed. But anyway, we got into a pandemic and they were finishing up book 7 and I just had enough. I never got to finish it. I just couldn't. But I made it all the way through like the second half of 6 and then kind of tapered off. But anyway, we have a lot of other bits of the book, but really the whole first part of the setup of the world, I think, was the main pieces that we want to talk about today. But a few more things to just talk about really quickly would be things related to Harry dealing with Hagrid's situation with the dragon, the kids, we already talked about a little bit with the troll situation, and dealing with Quirrell. And I would say the biggest thing we could talk about with Quirrell, and if we go in this direction first and then kind of move into those other topics if we have time, is the reference to a wolf in sheep's clothing. Because when we think of Quirrell, he's very sheepish anyway. Oh, hello, Harry. Oh, hello. And so he's already acting like a little wuss anyway, and yet he's got this whole other side to him. So what do we know about Quirrell and how do we feel about him?
Well, he wasn't a Slytherin.
Okay.
Let's just get that out there.
How do we know that?
It reveals that he was a Ravenclaw, I think, maybe on Pottermore.
I think it was Pottermore.
Yeah,
which is
somewhere
like-
said he was a Ravenclaw.
I think she made a post about Pottermore, like before the books were done, being written or something like that.
Could you repeat that? Because we couldn't understand what you were saying.
There's a website called Pottermore, and that's where J.K. Rowling has written blogs over the years to just give extra details about the Harry Potter world. And in that website, she said that Quirrell was a Ravenclaw, so he was not a Slytherin.
Oh, okay.
But that's not in the book or the movie.
Yeah. Well, at the end of the movie too, he says, you know, there is no good or evil. There's just power.
Yeah,
And believes it.
yeah. Or at least he's lying to himself about it.
Right.
Yeah.
I was sort of not quite understanding that Conan died and Voldemort smoked away. What made him die? Because Harry Potter touched him and his body sort of disintegrated?
I think we can't overthink it because it is the first book of a children's series and she didn't know how the ending would happen when she wrote that one. So we can't think too in depth about exactly what happened to Voldemort and Quirrell.
He kind of did
Well,
spell it.
It's kind of,
It explains it.
yeah, it gets kind of more explained later, like she goes back, I feel like it revisits like what happened
Yeah.
there, but.
But at that point, nobody knows,
It's
right?
like,
He just said, Dumbledore said something along the line, she just gave like the power of love saved you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that he couldn't touch you because
Yeah.
of that love.
And then in later books, he goes into why exactly in more detail and what was going on.
And again, everything that Harry's learning from Dumbledore is mostly speculation from Dumbledore. So every time, and we'll see the cycle through the movies and the books, there's usually some sort of long conversation where Dumbledore explains a little bit more at the end of every book or movie. So Harry gets a little bit more of the story. But like to Dumbledore's fault, he doesn't give Harry enough information fast enough. And so at the end of the first one, he really just chalks it up to love and he says, that's what saved you. Well, do you think Voldemort can ever really come back? Well, maybe. Yeah, I think so. But I saw a question come up that made me think, I hadn't thought of this before. Did Dumbledore plan for Harry to fight Voldemort in that situation where he had to go through all those little puzzles and spells?
I don't think so. Oh, you go.
oh, I was gonna say, the puzzles and stuff that they had set up seemed like ridiculously easy for the talent level of the teachers.
Yeah.
Like, there's like the chess game, in the books, there's like a riddle that was figured out by Hermione who's 11. Like, there's just so many, like the flying keys even, they seem so simple compared to what they're trying to protect. Other than the last one with the mirror, nothing really would be that difficult for someone who's talented enough to know about the Sorcerer's Stone and attempt to try and get it.
I feel like they were almost all basically for show.
Yeah.
And in a way, honestly, just to make it look like it was started, like, why would you want to keep going without having started? And something along those lines would deter most people, right? Would deter students, you know, if students wandered in, they saw a three-headed dog, they would get out, you know?
Yeah.
But I think, I can't remember if he says it in the books, but somewhere in my head, I remember Dumbledore saying, I knew he could not get through that mirror. You know, it was something along those lines where only the person who wanted it but did
not
not want
to use
it could get it. So there was no way that Quirrell was going to get it. Dumbledore wasn't even really worried about it. So he was not really I don't think he was expecting that fight, but I think it kind of worked out in their favor, I guess, in a way.
Yeah. Well, and each of the three, Hermione, Ron, and Harry, all had talents and interests that helped. Each of them had something that helped get through one or more of those.
Very specific, like Ron, we see like his chess skills throughout the first book, and Hermione, her knowledge helping with like the potions, and then Harry obviously the flying past.
Yeah.
I have a question about the stone. If it was so valuable, why did they get rid of it supposedly? Because Harry asked about it. He didn't even know he had it. It was in his pocket.
Mm-hmm.
And he asked about it, and we had to destroy it. And I thought, well, why did they have to hide it for so long and then destroy it? It didn't
Too
make,
much power for one person.
I don't know, it didn't make much sense to me.
It wasn't truly hidden that, because, I mean, for a while, it was with the creator of the stone for like 600 years.
Okay.
So it only went into Gringotts fairly recently, I'm pretty sure I read, and then it got moved to Hogwarts, like just that year, obviously, in the show.
Wasn't that the thing that was in the safe?
Yeah.
That was the package.
And then Quirrell was there and Quirrell was there trying to get over to Diagon Alley, and he
I was
was
gonna
still
say,
in
is
the
that why they
cauldron.
moved it? Because he was on the hunt. He was coming.
Dumbledore had a hunch, yeah.
If you think about it, other than year 4, that is the only time that that version of Voldemort attempted to come back. That is the only plan he really had until year 4, because year 2 was part of his soul in the diary. That's who was trying to come back. In year 3, he really wasn't too far involved with anything that was going on. So really, that was his only plan. And I think Dumbledore kind of realized that and realized that Voldemort's going to keep coming back for this. He's not going to let this drop, because if he can, if he can get Pearl, who else can he get to? And then you really can't tell who's under his control. You could send someone and gain Dumbledore's trust, or who knows what could happen. It was a thing that Voldemort's going to keep coming back, and it's too dangerous to let it sit.
Well, and the complete wolfiness, sheepiness comes up when Quirrell is the defense against the dark arts teacher, like the complete opposite of what his message is as a teacher is what he's trying to do as, his other side of his personality. But to go back to that stone situation, Dumbledore's answer to Harry is, death is only the next great adventure. And so allusion to eternal life there anyway. And so if we were talking about, that tree of life in the Garden of Eden a little while ago, and then the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, then that's the same. It's restored in Revelation that, we see there that tree reemerges in the new heaven and the new earth. Yeah, I just feel so bad for Hagrid too. We haven't talked about him that much, aside from at the very beginning when we said he was one of the 3 wise men. So do we want to see anything else about Hagrid's journey with the dragon and with the downfall of basically telling Quirrell, who was in the cloak at the pub, oh yeah, I got the dragon egg from a stranger down at the pub. He wanted to know what kind of creatures I guard. Yes. Oh, shouldn't have said that. He says I shouldn't have said that over and over. Yeah.
It's lovingly simple.
Lovingly simple or sinful?
Simple.
Simple.
Yeah.
I think he's almost one of those people who are at times, like you said, loyal to a fault. Where it sometimes goes too far. Where if you think about Aragog and the castle, and I'm sorry, I keep going to other books.
That's okay.
Aragog and the
I just
castle,
told you don't spoil 7.
I've been trying to stay away from that one. Aragog in the castle, right? And that's something that could have ended really badly. If the Basilisk had been running around, who knows what would have happened if that Aragog had stayed in the castle. Hagrid is a character that's almost loyal to a fault, but sometimes think of the different situation. I can't go into the book now. But just I don't know. I feel like he definitely does portray, not that loyalty is a bad thing, but he does kind of push too far sometimes.
There's another example of him like specifically being very loyal to Dumbledore is when he does magic at the Pot on the Rock, and he talks about not insulting Albus Dumbledore in front of him because he knows that he's not supposed to do magic, and like he tells Harry that he shouldn't talk to anyone about him doing magic because he knows he's not supposed to, but he breaks these rules to defend Albus Dumbledore.
Yeah. And we see how important later in future books being loyal to Dumbledore is important for Harry and for others. Yeah. Yeah, it's tough. It's tough. Any last ideas? And we didn't mention the invisibility cloak, so I don't know if anybody wanted to.
One character that has been gone woefully unappreciated is Neville Longbottom.
Okay, go ahead. You got 10 points at the end, right?
I think that is one of the most important parts of the story is good works don't go unrewarded. And it's a thing of he did one of the scariest things that even in Dumbledore's eyes, standing up to friends is not an easy thing. Again, okay, I'm sorry, I'm going to another book.
That's okay.
Dumbledore, one of his greatest challenges was standing up to his friend, Gellert Grindelwald, and so that's why he respected Neville so much and respected how he stood up to his friends, and really Neville is one of those characters who has such a long arc over the books. He's not someone who drastically changes throughout a book. It's over the course of every single book. He's maturing and getting better and better. And it really shows. I guess the first book is kind of his biggest arc through one book, as he is totally incompetent at the beginning of the first, when he gets to Hogwarts and he's dropping his toad everywhere and can't figure out what is going on, honestly. And then he's, with the remember all getting stuck on the roof and things, but then by the end of it, he's saying that he won, or they won because of Kenny, simply because he was able to stand up to his friends.
So speaking of Neville, and for those of you who only watch the movies and are planning on watching one a week as we go through this, it's not very obvious in the books or in the movies as it is in the books of the parallels of Harry's life to Neville's life. So keep that in mind as you're rewatching them now, and see if you can find any of those pieces, because those might be some elements that get thrown in our conversation over the next few weeks. Not so much in 2 and 3, but as we move on, is recognizing how Harry and Neville have this parallel pathway in a way. So there's going to be some elements about Neville that never made it into the movies that we will probably be bringing up with just, it's hard for us to resist not talking about that. Yeah.
But that's because it'd been a while since I had watched the movies again. We've been watching them again here. That I was really noticing the parallels with Neville, and also the one that's really like touched me this time is the Weasleys.
Mm-hmm.
And watching it, just fresh through. I just haven't watched them through in so long, and how they are the continual, like, you guys hear me talk all the time. I'm big on mustard seed things, and the Weasleys are them. That they look like nothing special. They're kind of the runt to the litter, it looks like, and yet they are. I think Coley has said this. They're like the linchpins of the story. The story would fall apart without them, and all that. So yeah.
Yep. It's 5:15, and that was fun. Thanks for coming. Next week, we will have other themed foods. Feel free to eat more now or take it with you. And there will be some different decorations, but mostly the same. I do have a few things that'll be different. And this is just so much fun for me. So thank you for coming and humoring me in all of this.
I think we all agree very much.
And as far as Zoom goes, Chris, are you on the laptop with it where I can carry the laptop around for you to see, or do I have to carry around that camera?
No, we can
Okay, so I want the online people to see a tour of the decorations.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right, so
But thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
Hey everyone. Here, hold on one second.
Hi.
Go, Chris.
Okay. Yeah,
Are they looking that way?
they're looking
Oh,
at
they're
this
looking
way.
at me.
Do you want?
Yeah.
Looking at y'all.
We see
Hi.
you.
Well, what do I need to do to flip it around? Oh.
Okay.
So here we have some keys.
Oh,
very cute.
I hung keys on the wall with 3M strips. There's our Hogwarts crest banner.
Awesome.
And
Very cool.
then I got these for Teacher of the Year gifts. They are pages from the books, but then there's like stickers of all the house crests. And then I have the Hogwarts jewels and a quill from my mother-in-law. And then Amy, this is coming to you. I got you a personalized happy birthday, Harry birthday cake.
Thank you.
We've got Hedwig. And here's some Legos. I made burgers because Hagrid gave those to Harry after Diagon Alley. Got my spoons. There's Harry's ticket to Hogwarts. And here's a half-eaten birthday cake for happy birthday, Harry. Here's the Birdie Bots every flavor bean boxes. I made these individually, 40 minutes a piece. That was real fun. So yeah.
That's a lot, but like that's.
So that was the decorations.
Good job.
Looks great.
Looks awesome.
Very
Yes.
cool.
So funny.
You did an amazing job.
And
I'm
we've
gonna
got
say bye. We're off to Daniel's birthday.
the portraits up
Thanks.
here. And then we've got the invisibility cloak and the Quidditch balls.
Oh,
Which is
wow.
Dobby. Dobby's from Gene. That's his stuffed animal. I actually ordered it for him when Lee wanted it to be his surprise gift.
I remember him getting it.
Thanks for joining. We'll try and get the sound a little bit better next time.
Yeah, you were very clear, but the further away, and if there were more people talking, it got complicated.
Yeah, I think that maybe some of these people who are talking more, now that I know who was more interested in talking, I'll ask them to sit closer to the middle next time.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we'll try that.
Good idea.
Amy,
Yeah.
did you get to stay the whole time?
I did.
Oh, good. Mark kept the kids for a few minutes.
Well, they were looking at me through the window constantly, and so I was very distracted, but I stayed and watched it. Hi.
Hi, Sharon.
Good. Yeah, so we had fun. So hopefully you guys can join us again next time.
No, it was
Will
great.
do.
Thanks for.
And please feel free to step in and talk more because, I mean, we can all hear you very clearly. So throw in your 2 cents whenever you feel like it.
Okay. Thanks a
All right.
lot. You did a great job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll talk again next week. Book 2, movie 2.
Yep. Bye.
Bye, Arwen.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, Cody.
Bye, Mitch and Ed. Good to see you. Bye.